Good afternoon, everyone. We are live, and thank you for hanging out there and waiting for us to go live this afternoon. Happy Monday. I am Marcia Guerriere, the founder and host of the founder of Her Sweet Spot, a private network for women of color advancing in leadership and entrepreneurship, and your host for the Her Rise Salon Talks. And I'm so excited to have my special guest here today, all the way from France, right? And Dr. Anino Emuwa is the founder and managing director of Avandis Consulting, a strategy and financial advisory firm in France, a former corporate banker with Citibank. She is an experienced non-executive director and sits on the board of several organizations. She is a member of the board of governors of Nottingham Trent University, a member of the Institute of Directors Expert Advisory Group on Diversity and Inclusion, and a member of the Global Advisory Board of UK's 21st. And she is an award-winning international speaker on entrepreneurship, emerging technologies, and diversity and inclusion. Anino has been invited to speak on prestigious institutions and conferences, including Forbes, Facebook, Association of MBAs, Business School of Leaders Forum, and so many other places. And I'm so honored that she could be here today for the Her Rise Salon Talk. For International Women's Month, Dr. Emuwa received her doctorate degree in business administration from Nottingham Business School, where she is an alumni fellow. She holds an MBA from Cranfield School of Management and a BS in economics from the London School of Economics. Welcome, welcome. Doctor, how are you this afternoon for you?
Marcia, thank you so much. It really is a pleasure to be on your show, and I'm really glad, we're having this chance to talk to each other. And it's fine. It's spring. Spring has sprung in France. It's a little bit wet, but at least the warmer weather is coming, and I'm delighted to be on your show. Thank you.
It is on the horizon here in New York, where I am. It's also going in and out of that spring-like weather, and we're back into a little bit of cold. But, we have patience. We've waited through this past year of going through so much change, and with the pandemic and the social unrest that's been happening globally. So we're here talking about building global brands and global presence. And, before we get into anything, we didn't even discuss this, but having everything that happened last year actually being such a global impact, having such a global impact, how are you doing right now? Because it's not just a US thing or a UK or France thing, it's all of us.
Well, that is such a great question to start with, Marcia. First of all, today it's almost exactly a year that we went into lockdown in France.
Yeah.
And this was with only a couple of days' notice. In fact, a year ago, it was on a Friday. I arrived in Paris after a long haul trip to have meetings with CEOs and an ambassador. And then I was to come back, go to the UK for a week. And everything came to a standstill,
right? To
a sudden stop. Yes, we knew that something would happen, but the governments hadn't announced it. So we had to, instantly sort of change our business model, which wasn't too terribly difficult at first in any case, because of the international nature of our work. We work around the world and globally, and therefore a lot of our work is digital. But It meant that, events that we hosted, which are really a critical part of what we do, we couldn't do those any longer. It also meant that some consultancy projects that we had, which were face-to-face, we couldn't do those. But it's given us another opportunity, and that is to engage even more so globally. And I think we'll get back to that when you ask questions about global female leadership as well. And so there have been opportunities as well, even though, at the beginning it was tough for everybody. And I think that everyone is fed up, but we're coming out of it slowly, and there's hope. There's hope on the horizon. So I think that's what's important. But it hasn't been without its losses, and those have really been quite terrible.
And that's the sad part and the troubling part. I've been affected by it personally with different friends, extended family in this time. But I did coin the year past year the year of joy and pain, because so much good did come out of it despite all of the
Yes.
heartache and trouble and pain that so many people have gone through. First, let's get into some of the talks we wanted to reach today. Congratulations on, I mean, I really only hit the surface of all of your accomplishments, awards, and the many things that you have done for your career. You know, I say I amplify the voices of women of color, Black women especially, and you certainly have been doing that and for years. I want to first start with your extensive career in finance, working for companies, Fortune 500s like Citibank. Can you tell me, was it always in your path, although your degrees are in economics, and was it always in your path to go straight for Fortune 500s?
You know, it's such an interesting question because remember that when you start out your career, you're usually very young. But
Right.
do you know that at the age of 16, I decided I wanted to be an investment banker?
Wow.
There was nobody in my family who was an investment banker. My mother is a lawyer, my father, a consultant engineer. But for some reason, I didn't know anything about this, and this is what I wanted to do. And that determined some of my choices. In fact, most of my choices. That's why I studied economics, because it was the closest thing to finance in those days for a first degree. You didn't have very many degrees which were finance, right? So you
Right.
study economics, and that was, your entry level. And then I even specialized in monetary economics because at my university, which is the one I wanted to go to, which is London School of Economics in the UK, which is the foremost university of economics, certainly at this time. And so everything was geared towards that. And, you do all those interviews and all those milk rounds, as they call it, which were the recruiting, the recruitment, shall we say, events that all
Yeah.
these big companies had for the schools. And so that's how, so, with all the Morgan Stanleys and the JP Morgans and Citibank and all of those. So we did all of that. So that's how I ended up working with Citibank.
You know, we share so similarities. I too, at a very young age in high school, knew I wanted to be on Wall Street. I knew I
Right.
wanted to wear beautiful suits and go down to the big tall buildings of finance. So I share
Yeah,
a similar
yeah,
path as yours. So it is something that I was fortunate enough to go through those same types of programs
right.
here in the States to introduce me to the world of finance and financial services. Now, fast forward, you are your own boss. You're the CEO of, did I say it right? Avantis?
Avandis?
Yes. So, how
Yes.
did you transition yourself from working for large corporations in finance to then moving forward to working for yourself?
It's interesting because even though at an early age, I knew I wanted to work in banking, in investment banking. However, when I envision myself, and when I say envision, I mean it in terms of the picture. And I remember this at that age, I must have been I can't remember, but somewhere between sort of 18 and 20, or in my late teens or early 20s. I envisaged myself in front of a building, right, which housed my organization. So that was the physical vision I had. I can't tell you where that came from, but it was just in my head.
Wow.
So here I was wanting to be an investment banker and work in banking, and yet there was also a vision of being in front of the structure which I had created. So there was certainly the entrepreneurial side, in things. But interestingly enough, I think that what really drove me, because I started out in banking, very, very busy, corporate banking back in my home country in Nigeria. We used to work all these hours of day and night, and our colleague friends would say, "Oh no, it's not possible. You guys can't be working all those hours." And it was like, "Oh yes, we are." But would you know that with that, I still wanted to start off a small business, which I almost did, except that I decided to go off to business school, so I didn't. So I still had this entrepreneurial thing, and at business school, which was, of course, to further my career in banking, I also did courses in entrepreneurship. So to tell you that the two somehow went side by side at the same time. But what drove me into entrepreneurship, I think, was really coming, I'd studied in the UK for many years, going back to my country in Nigeria, and then looking at the needs that were there in terms of businesses. So I'm financing at a young age. I was 23. I had, these credit portfolios of firms writing credits of millions of dollars, right? And
Right.
earning millions of dollars for the bank per customer. And yet you're sitting there in Africa and realizing there are many small companies that aren't growing, and we're not going to develop if businesses don't grow.
Right.
And so that is what transitioned me from that world of financing big businesses into looking at development. What can we do to create our own new businesses, our own businesses that will thrive and grow? And I saw the same problem in many countries in Africa that I'd lived in. So that's really what transitioned me.
That's so affirming, and also very much the same journey that I'm on right now in building her sweet spot. It came out of a need of working in this field, working in fintech, helping white men get richer with their startups, working for startups, and then finally coming to a point where I said to myself, very similarly, we can do this for each other, for our community, to help women of color, Black women, build their businesses and take some piece of the pie. So I'm very moved by your story, and that's why it was really important for me to speak with you today. So thank you again for being my guest. I'm truly honored. And in all that you've done, working for global companies and realizing that there was a need for the services of your business, you certainly have, with all of your accolades, all of the mentoring that you do uh, as just an individual, right? What are some steps women should do and should be thinking about as they're trying to build their own business? How important is it to build a global brand? So, what are some of the steps we could do to begin to build global brands?
I think that is even more important now than ever before. Because remember that when you're starting a business, typically most businesses are small. The vast majority of businesses are small, in fact.
Right.
90% more than that are small. And small means that your geographic reach is also limited. That's what a small business is about. So your customers and your the area you're operating is geographically proximate to you. So very often you didn't need, for most small businesses, do not need, right, to be involved in what is happening outside their geography. That
Right.
is the traditional way. But now we're seeing, and it isn't just today, it's been coming. We've seen the ability to use digital technology to reach customers and to, across boundaries, right, across
Right.
regions. And with the pandemic, what it did show, and I think that's where a lot of small businesses fell down because they were local, right? So they were used to customers walking in or your customers being around you and then finding that this didn't happen. And they had no infrastructure and no way to reach customers. Now, tech companies, of course, automatically, that's the reason you have a platform, the ability to reach across boundaries. In fact, you don't even see boundaries. But even more so now, that even if you're a smaller business, you're starting up, you need to be able to reach across boundaries, and also it protects your business. Because
Correct.
if there's a sort of a local economic crisis or demand or whatever it is, you still can reach to customers. But then for smaller businesses, as you say, you don't have a brand. People don't know about you because within your geography, people hear about you. Oh, there's that consultant, around the corner who does this, or that software company, or that shop, or that producer of this and that. People know you, right, from reputation. But then when you're working digitally, then people don't know you. So how are you going to secure these customers? And the marketing and all the sales that you do is actually the first thing you need to do is to establish that brand, right? So that people understand you and understand what you're about, in order that you can access markets globally.
So establishing the brand, and when you're
Yes.
establishing that brand, is it important to have the mindset to be global so that you're actually not limiting yourself? Because when I started off my business, I did focus on building it in a local way, but I knew I
Yes,
wanted to go further. So
yes,
I did things that I knew in creating marketing and conversations that would reach people further away, even though I was working in a local setting to kind of
yes,
build the brand and its necessity, right, for the marketplace. I've always maintained some sense of global reach. How important? So I heard you say protect your business. It protects your business. Being global protects
sure.
your business because there are so many, like in the US, in New York, we had across the eastern board, we had Hurricane Sandy, which really
Yes,
had a huge impact on so many cities in New York. But it continued, and I think that was the start of that emergence of going more digital, being able to reach more people beyond your local, even though you keep a local presence, have some type of website presence and building that technology beyond the brick and mortar local shop that you have. How did you get yourself to become this international global speaker? What did you do to say, you know what, I need to reach more than my local area?
yes. You know, first of all, you have to be intentional. But just before I get there, just to explain a little bit about myself and how I reached. It started off like this. I've lived in 6 countries, right? And automatically, when you live in countries, you become very culturally aware, and you tend to see more of similarities than differences.
Right.
And in all the countries I lived in Africa and Europe, as far as I'm concerned, people's needs were the same, right?
Yes.
And so I found it artificial, all these sort of barriers we put amongst ourselves. I remember I had these 2 friends. There were 3 of us, and coming from different countries. They also had husbands and children who came from husbands from different countries. So between 3 of us, I think there were about 6 or 7 countries. One came from 2 countries. So, and yet we had this closeness, and so all I could see were similarities and not differences,
Right.
really. And that even drove my need to actually learn and study French in France as well. And I think that that is the thing. You look at, what are the commonalities first and try to understand, of course, there are differences, but commonalities. And once you find that need and you find that that need transcends, countries and borders, then you know you're onto something. The other thing as well is that when you speak to people really in the sense of what it is that they need, what it is they're looking for, you also find that that transcends borders. And I think to the listeners here, people often say, what do you mean by this brand? Sometimes, especially for women, we may look at it as negative because we look at it as over promotion. But what a brand is very simple. It is your professional identity. That's all it is.
Mm.
Okay. That's what your brand is. It's your professional identity. What is it about you? Okay. And that identity, taking away the name of your organization and your position, but what is it about you that makes you different, right? Just as
Yeah.
your name makes you a different person or your face makes you a different person, right? So that's
Right.
what it is, establishing what your professional identity, right? And the thing about it is that in reaching your networks, you need to you look at already, you'll be surprised within your networks where you have some internationalization there already, and try to build from those existing networks into other networks. So always start from home, start from what you have, and grow it from out there. Externally, because it's difficult to suddenly enter into different markets, right? So you need to have the links and the pathways. So professional networks, for example, networks to do with school, organizations that you might have worked in. A lot of them tend to be international if they're big, and use those networks and those links as pathways into international markets.
I love that. And that's why we built Her Sweet Spot as a way for people to build and connect further into their network,
Yes,
especially women that are aspiring to be leaders and to grow their entrepreneurship business, because we're not always associated in our personal sphere with the people that could help us moving forward. Right now, there has been a huge, for some reason, in all of what we're going through, there's been a huge discussion about, um, you know, furthering Black women and furthering
Sure.
women of color. And there's been a lot of talk about mentorship versus sponsorship, right? Because in corporate America and in entrepreneurship, especially in the world of venture capital and having access to resources, it's usually because there is a sponsor. There are people that champion you and those around us, right? So as we talk about this mentor versus sponsor, who were some of your mentors or sponsors as you were climbing up in corporate America and as you were developing and growing your business to help you get to where you are?
That is such an interesting question, and it's only something that occurred to me fairly recently in thinking about, who are my mentors. And to some respect, actually, my mentors have become sponsors.
Mm-hmm.
Very simply, because I was in the banking world, very, very simply, my mentors were men because predominantly they were men. Now, I assure you, I never thought about it. I never thought about, how many women there were in my career in university. I never did. This
Yeah.
was many, many years later that the numbers. Now, to me, it was normal. And so there was nothing abnormal about having men as mentors because, they were my seniors, right?
Yes.
And so I had three men and I'm sure there's a fourth in the banking sector who are my mentors and who till today, and knowing them now for 30 years, right? I still call them mentors because I do go to them for advice. And not only are they mentors, because of course, we've left organizations, they've done different things, they
Mhm.
also act as sponsors. So oftentimes, if there's something or somebody or someplace I need to go, right, there are people who can actually speak for me and say, yes, um, I know this person and I recommend, and even, even all through, all my various degrees and all of that, they wrote references for me. And they
Right.
sort of know me, over that part of my life, right? In fact, most of my life now,
Yes.
in reality. So there were men, and that was just because that was the sector that I was in
That
banking.
was right in finance
Right.
and especially finance, financial services and fintech. That's all
Yes.
you saw, and that was kind of the
Yes.
opposite. What I went through was that there were women, pockets of women that would see me and help
Yes.
me get a little
Yes.
further along. What was some of the advice they gave you though, as you were trying to get to the next level? Is there a key piece of advice you've ever received that stuck with you all these years?
Oh gosh, yes. I remember the first one. It was my boss, right? And here I was in the corporate bank and I was writing my first credit. And he said something, I can't remember the exact words, but something to the effect of this. He said, it's your first credit, right? So when you're writing, there'll be, it won't be perfect or whatever it is, maybe errors or it could be better. He
Right.
said, it's your first, but then it becomes your second, and then it becomes your third. And I instantly understood. He didn't say more than that.
Yeah.
That there's no question of it's the first time. Do it right the first time. It was as
Right.
simple as that.
Wow.
And I love that, And and when I say it stuck because yeah, I was 22, 23, or whatever it was. And within that um must have been certainly within the year, maybe even 6 months, one of my credits, because of course the bank was a global bank, was recognized globally as one of the best written credits internationally
Wow.
ever. And it was just because this was my boss that said it to me, So don't think of it as a learning curve, just learn it now,
Yeah,
as simple as that. Yes.
that's awesome. So, you know, having a sponsor was definitely something. And I also, because I've been in the industry over 20 years as well, and so
Yeah,
we didn't think of it as sponsors. We just thought of it as, a mentor, and you stick close by with people who value you
that's it.
and share those same visions and want to see you advance as well. So for you, how did that help you become such the big mentor that you are, and in becoming such a global influence to so many women?
Because I had that, I knew it was unusual, right?
Yes.
And then seeing women who didn't have that opportunity, I felt something needed to be done. Although, I mean, I mentor men, by the way, young men as well as, women, but a lot of women.
Yeah.
And I felt that, it's almost like having a kind of a pathway.
Yeah.
There's no need to reinvent the wheel if somebody, has done it already. You can learn from them. And I think that that is what led me, because I knew that I was lucky to have had that naturally. It was totally informal. It just happened.
Right.
But realizing that many women didn't have that opportunity.
I like what you just said, that it was informal, because it
Yes,
should be informal. It should be
yes,
organic. And that's what makes it real. That's what makes it, a lot of people are trying to now force, and in corporations, they're forcing these programs for sponsorship and mentorship. And it's almost sometimes women are reporting that it feels like another job, like
yeah,
they have to do. And if they say
yes,
no, what are some things people could do to kind of not make it feel forced? Should you look for
sure.
mentors outside of the organization?
That is true. And I've had this question from a mentee as well, or rather, a young lady who was looking for a mentor. And what I said to her is that you actually, I don't think you need to ask somebody to be a mentor. It
Mm-hmm.
happens naturally. That's the best way. But the thing is, you look at people that you know who are senior to you, whether within the organization or external to the organization, and ask them for advice. And
Right.
that's how the mentorship grows. So that is what I would advise younger people. Ask people who are within that career, who've been there before you, and ask them for their advice. And that could grow into a mentoring relationship.
Yes. At Her Sweet Spot, we have 4 pillars that we go by, which is mindset, money, marketing, and media. And you have
Okay.
written for some of the best publications out there that have a very global reach. How important was it, or strategic was it, for you to become right for publications like Forbes, in order to help you grab your global reach and become recognized as an expert in your field? Can you just share something about that?
Yes, it's important because you need the visibility. That is what is going to help you to become global. You need that visibility. And when I wrote for Forbes, I remember what happened was it was an organization, and they said you should submit something, right? And I know that it was actually quite a painful process. But in
Mm.
the end, not only did they like it, it got syndicated. It was both Forbes and Entrepreneur. So it's worth the effort. But then it just helps to establish your credibility as an expert. So that visibility is something that very often as women leaders we need to work on.
Right.
And whether it's through speaking or it's through writing, these are some of the ways that you can establish your credibility by becoming visible, more visible. Absolutely important.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anino, for being my guest today. And before I let you go, I
Okay.
want to ask you, and most of our women here at Her Sweet Spot are navigating between employee and employer,
Sure.
making that transition, still building their small businesses. What were some of the experiences you went through, and what mindset should you have in order to properly navigate between these two spaces in order to make that proper exit strategy away from corporate America to go full time?
I think what the real difficulty, and it's an honest one, is the loss of income. Because in the corporate world, you're earning an income and then you leave for not earning income. So the thing is, you need to be prepared. So that financial readiness is important.
Mhm.
Have something aside which can you can live on, right? And you find that when you're in the entrepreneurship world, you can live on a lot less, right, than what you earn in the corporate world.
You learn to scale back when you're
You learn to scale back, and then to know that the success, it might come in a day, but usually it doesn't come in a day. It takes a few years. Still, I work with lots of smaller businesses, and one thing is just tenacity. You need to be tenacious. Really, you might need to change, you might need to pivot a little bit, but you need to be resilient and to be tenacious.
yes.
Really, there's no easy way round it.
Ask, 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 and you shall receive one day.
Yes.
Thank you
Yes.
so much again for being our guest. Bye, guys. Until next time, I'll see you here at tomorrow. We'll be interviewing Tracy Chambers from the technical director of at Charles Schwab. So thank you again, Dr. Anino, for being my guest today. Bye bye for now.
Thank you, Marcia. Thanks everybody for watching.